All righty, we will go ahead and get started here. We do want to welcome everyone. This is our webinar for campus journal entries, in particular some of the correcting journal entry enhancements, what we're going to talk about this morning. And it's always more fun to do one of these when we have what we feel like is an abundance of good news to share with you all. So we're certainly excited to see how many people we have on the webinar this morning, and excited to share quite a few different items with you. So who do we have on the webinar this morning? Well, I'm Justin Case. I'm a training specialist within continuous improvement and staff development. We also have Steve Kinney, business systems manager with ITS Enterprise Applications, as well as Sherry Olson, senior financial reporting business analyst. And I teach the Creating Journal Entries trainings, which are usually filled with new employees, but I teach the trainings there. And then Steve and Sherry worked very heavily on this particular project, and I know quite a few of the ins and outs, and will be assisting with the Q&A portion of the presentation at the end. And we also have Rebecca Jones as our moderator, which has been a huge help this morning as well. So thanks to Rebecca. All right, so as far as the format for the webinar this morning, I will give a brief presentation that will be followed by a Q&A. We do ask that you use the chat window feature to type your questions, and at the conclusion of the presentation, we will answer questions during the Q&A segment in the order they're received. Rebecca will be pulling those and throwing those out to us as a group in order to answer. And we'll also be recording the webinar, and we'll post that in a few days on ccinfo.unc.edu. So if you need to watch certain portions again, or if you have coworkers who missed the webinar this morning, that will be available as well. So as far as the specifics of what will be covered, we will start by covering the enhancements to the Correcting JE process. Also share a few available resources to help you along your journey. And at the end, we will open it up for questions. So before we talk about the enhancements, I did just want to do a quick review of the current configuration for the Correcting JE and Correcting Voucher JE journal entry types, just to sort of set the stage so you can see how things are now, and then compare those to what will happen with the enhancements. All right, so as far as the current configuration goes, as many of you know, there are currently two different Correcting JE journal entry types. There's the Correcting JE type and the Correcting Voucher JE type. And when you do a Correcting journal entry, currently you have to decide which of those two types to use. Currently you have 8 different search fields that can be used, and was it a pain point for many of you, as we have heard, you can currently only correct one line at a time. So I think we have some good news we can share with you on that topic. Currently there is no header description field, and there's quite a limited number of voucher corrections that are allowed. Okay, so moving on to the new. Let's talk about some of the new features with the Correcting JE process. So as far as the enhancements, the first is highlighted in orange because that's the first one that we will cover here. But the search capability has been improved and expanded, and we will show you what that looks like. Furthermore, Correcting JE and Correcting Voucher JE journal entry types have been combined into just one correcting type. You can now make multiple corrections on one entry. So I can hear your applause in the background. So again, you can make multiple corrections in one entry moving forward. So we're excited about that. In addition to that, the ability to copy down chart-filled strings if you want to make the same edits to multiple lines. There's also a 256-character journal header description field. We will show you what that looks like. And we have increased flexibility in the types of voucher corrections that you can make. And while we're on this screen, it is important to point out that these enhancements only apply to the Correcting JE journal entry type. So these enhancements will not apply to the other journal entry types. And these enhancements were made priority based on the level of demand and feedback that we were hearing from many of you in wanting these types of enhancements. So there may be other enhancements to come, but these current enhancements only apply to the correcting JE type, and it is important to point that out. So let's dive in. So again, to start with, search capability is now bigger and better. So to help you put that in perspective, on the left side of your screen, we've given you a screenshot of the current search fields available to you. And on the right is a screenshot of the new search fields that will be available to you. And we'll talk a little more about that. But with the new search criteria, fiscal year, accounting period, and business unit are always required. And it's also going to want you, in addition to those three required fields, it's typically going to want you to also enter in one of the following: either a journal ID, a journal source and doc type, or fund source and department, or project ID, in addition to the three required fields, which again are fiscal year, accounting period, and business unit. So let's talk a little more about the search screen here. So again, you can search using more targeted search criteria, and an example of that would be the new doc type field that you see highlighted on your screen there. And that allows you to search by some of the same subset IDs that you actually see in info port. So for instance, if I wanted to correct lines associated with a direct journal deposit, I could select the doc type DJ deposit, as you see there on your screen. And below that, in the document ID field, I can enter my deposit ID number. And at that point, my search results should just return the lines associated with that particular deposit. So we can be much more targeted in our searching for the lines that we want to make corrections on. So that's a nice feature we're excited to share with you. All right, so we just talked about the enhancements to the search capabilities. The next enhancement we will discuss is how the correcting JE and correcting voucher JE journal entry types have now been combined into one. So currently, we have the correcting JE type, correcting voucher JE type, and again, those have been rolled into one journal entry type, which is the correcting JE journal entry type. So they basically eliminated one of the decision points that you previously would encounter when having to decide which journal entry type to use. Now for any type of journal entry corrections you will make, you will just select the correcting JE journal entry type. So you can see, you just use the same menu path across the top of the screen. That hasn't changed to ultimately land on campus journal entry. And then when selecting your transaction group, you just select correcting JE and then the correcting JE journal entry type. Okay, and again, maybe the enhancement we are most excited to discuss with you. You can now make multiple corrections or correct multiple lines on one journal entry. So to get started with a little humor, I'll give you a second to take a look at this. So as that relates to journal entries, maybe some of you have had a very busy morning when suddenly you were asked to correct multiple lines on a journal entry. And with the current configuration, you have to do a separate journal entry for each line. And that can take a while, and often happens when you're in a hurry. So let's talk about what it'll look like moving forward. So if we want to do a correcting JE and correct multiple lines at a time, we would go to the search criteria here. And so for instance here I've entered 2017 for the fiscal year, accounting period 3, UNCCH for my business unit, and I entered in my journal ID. And in my search results, you can see at the bottom of the screen, it's returned 10 lines. So for this particular journal ID, there are 10 lines associated with it. And it is important to point out here that you can not only can you correct multiple lines associated with the same journal entry, you can also correct multiple lines even if they're associated with different transactions. So that is something to point out. So For example, in your search, you could just include, in addition to the 3 required fields at the top, you could also search by fund, source, and department, and say maybe you wanted to see all of the transactions within a particular accounting period for your department. It would return all of those in your results. And even if they're associated with a different transaction or different journal ID, you can still correct multiple lines within one correcting JE. So much faster, much more efficient, and that is important to point out. So here, as you can see, this particular journal ID has 10 lines associated with it. And let's just say that I only needed to make corrections on the top 2 lines. I would just check the boxes for the top 2 lines. And that would look as so. And previously, as many of you know, you would just have radio buttons on the left, and you would have to select the radio button for the single line that you wanted to correct within that particular correcting JE. Now, you have check boxes, and you can select multiple check boxes at a time to correct multiple lines. So for this example, we'll say we're going to select the first 2 boxes, and we've checked those there on your screen. And at that point, we just click Next, as you see down at the bottom. Okay, so when we click Next, it'll bring us to this screen. It should look relatively familiar. There are a few changes that we'll point out to you, but you'll notice that it defaults to just displaying one line at a time. And so there in the orange highlight box, you'll see it's displaying line 1 of the 2 that we selected on the previous screen. You can also click View All. This is particularly useful if you're only correcting a small handful of lines at a time. You can click View All. And what that does is that will display all the lines that you've selected there on the initial screen. So now I can see both of the lines that I'm looking to correct. And under where it says Correction Journal Offset, you will see the original chart field string values. And then below that, you'll see the empty fields where we can enter the correcting line chart field values for the corrections that we want to make. So at this point, if we did want to, let's say we wanted to make the same edit for multiple lines. Well, I can check the boxes for each of the lines that I want to apply the edit to. And before we do that, we'll just show you sort of where we are in the presentation. So now we are going to talk about having the ability to copy down chart field strings if we're making the same edits to the multiple lines. So again, to do that, we would want to click the Expand section arrow next to Copy Chart Fields at the top, as you see surrounded by the orange box, as well as check the boxes to the left of each line that we want to apply the edit to. Okay, so now you can see what the arrows are pointing out. So at the top, for this example, let's say you can see on the original line the department number was 621-300. And I'm going to say, you know what, that was an error on my part. I need to change the department number to 621-400. So you can see at the top of the screen, I've entered the new department number, 621-400. And I've also checked the boxes to the left. That's what the arrows below are pointing out. I've checked the boxes to the left of each line that I want this correction applied to. And then you just click Copy to Selected Line, as you see highlighted there. So the result of that, you can now see that the new department number has been entered into each of the correcting lines that I checked the box for. So again, very nice as far as being able to apply the same edit to multiple lines at a time. You can even click Select All there at the top of the screen if you want the edit to be applied to all of the lines in this particular correcting JE. Okay, so once we've done that, we still need to populate the other fields within our chart field stream. And if you just want to populate those with the values that were used on the original journal entry or transaction, you can just click Auto Balance. And once I do that, you can see it populate all of the other chart fields or chart field values with the values that I used on the original transaction. And at this point, we will move on to our next feature that we want to point out, which is you now have a 256 character journal header description field at the top of the screen. So let's take a look at that. So we've highlighted it for you there. And this is really intended to allow you to include just an overall summary that applies to all of the lines that you are correcting within this particular correcting JE. So it's an overall summary. You do have 256 characters. And if you need to also enter details specific to each line that you're correcting, you will still have the description field. If you scroll all the way to the right of the correcting lines for new journal section for each of the lines, the last field should be a description field that will allow you, it allows you 30 characters to include line level detail about each particular line that you're correcting. So the journal header description is for an overall summary that applies to all the corrections that you're making here. And if you need to add details specific to each line, the description field at the end of each correcting line will allow you to do so. It is important to point out that if you try to save the journal without including anything in the journal header description, you will get a message. So this is a required field, so you will want to keep that in mind, that you do need to have some information in the journal header description field before moving forward. Okay, so we'll say we entered our description, and we have moved forward to the next screen here. And the first thing that you'll notice on this screen in the top left is you now have the attachments hyperlink. And this is very important. So even though you've entered information in the journal header description field, per audit requirements, you still need to include an attachment for each of the correcting JEs that you're going to complete. Okay, so keep that in mind. Definitely don't overlook that step. You have the attachments hyperlink there in the top left. So you can see here on this screen you have the original lines, and then below them you have the correcting lines with the new information and the new department number that we've entered. You also have on the bottom right of the screen you have ends under journal edit status and budget check status. And N is for no status, so we know we need to run our checks. You can see at the top that you also, since we've saved on the previous screen, it also generated a journal ID. And this is a new journal ID assigned to this particular correcting JE. So to run our journal edit check, which will check for combo edit errors in the chart field strings that we've used, as well as the budget check, we simply make sure that edit journal is displayed in the process field, and then we will click the process button. And if everything goes well and we do not get any error messages, we can see these nice beautiful V's down at the bottom right under journal status and budget status, telling us that we have passed both of our checks. So at this point we are ready to approve. We can look over everything one more time, but at this point, if we've included our attachment, we have our V's, we're ready to approve, and this process is the same as it is now. And there's really two different ways you can do this. You can actually, sorry, we're not approving, we're going to submit. Let me correct myself. But there are actually two different ways to submit the journal. You can do it on this screen. If you want to change edit journal to submit journal, there in the process field, and then click process. But the only thing with that is if you do that, sometimes it can be a little unfulfilling because you don't get any major confirmation message or really any indicator on this particular screen that lets you know that you have successfully submitted. So another way that you can do this, and I think a way that some of you are using already, is you can click the Approval tab that you see here at the top of the screen. And then, if you haven't submitted already, you can click the Submit button that you see there at the top right. But either way that you submitted, one way you can know, or two ways you can know that has been done successfully, is your approval status should say pending approval. And then below that, it should show you the actual approval path that the journal entry will follow. So if you haven't successfully submitted for approval, it will not show you the path, but if you have, it'll say pending approval in your approval status, and you'll be able to see the path down below. So there you have it. And on that note, it is important, one other thing I did just want to point out is once you have corrected certain lines, they will now still show up in your search results. Previously they would not, but now they will still show up in your search results. So for example, you can see on the screen, I've highlighted with an orange box, a few of the lines we have already corrected. Now you'll notice those are grayed out, so I can't select those boxes to correct those same lines again. I would need to make corrections on the new journal ID, but they will at least be displayed in my search results, and that way I can at least see those and say, okay, I've already corrected those particular lines. All right, and the last enhancement we did just want to touch briefly on for you is you do have a bit of increased flexibility in when making voucher corrections. So, for instance, things that are never restricted would include the following fields. So department, program, cost code 1, cost code 2, cost code 3, PC business unit, project or activity. You can certainly correct those when correcting vouchers. Now, the account will always be the same for both sides of the journal entry. And the account field will actually be grayed out on the new correcting line, so it will not allow you to do it there. But there are no restrictions on changing fund and source if your state contract waiver equals any of the following. So that would include HB 975 is not applicable, the order at the state contract price, or there's qualified funding with no flexibility. Moving on, fund and source values on a new correcting line may have restrictions based on the following state contract waiver values. So if you have these values, which would be flexibility used is less than the state contract price, or there's qualified funding and there's flexibility used, you may have restrictions on fund and source values. So just keep that in mind. And just as it is now, if you need to change or correct the account number for a transaction related to a voucher, there is a separate process for that. So instead of using a correcting JE, you would first make sure it is the account on the voucher that you want to change. Then you complete the account change request form and send that to disbursements_team@unc.edu, and you wait for a reply from Disbursement Services. And once you get that reply, you would then complete an other intra-unit journal to change the chart flow stream rather than a correcting JE. And your attachment for that particular journal entry would be the email approval from Disbursement Services. So you want to save that and include that as your attachment. And that process is the same as it is now. So when is all this happening? Go live for this is this Friday, so 12/16. So if you log into the system this Friday, you should be able to go to the Campus Journal, go to Campus Journal entry in Connect, Carolina, and you will see the changes there. So we just talked about the enhancements that we wanted to share with you, and also wanted to briefly touch on a few resources to help you along your journey. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to post this webinar on ccinfo.unc.edu. That'll be up in a few days. Furthermore, we are editing our Campus Journal Student Guide, and that will be edited to reflect the changes we've just shared with you. So if you need sort of a step-by-step outline when you're doing a correcting JE based on the new enhancements, we'll have those instructions in the Student Guide for you. That will also be uploaded to CCInfo. And lastly, I just want to touch a little bit on access to Campus Journal entry in Connect, Carolina. So the good news is, if you have access already, you're all set. So if you can currently access Campus Journal entry, you do not need to do anything else. You're all set, and the changes will be reflected there for you the next time that you use Campus Journal entry. Now, if you do not currently have access to Campus Journal entry, just as it works for many of the other screens in Connect, Carolina, you need to complete an access request form. Give that form to your Access Request Coordinator, or your ARC for short. And then, most likely you'll be asked to attend the Creating Journal Entries training, which will most likely be led by either myself or Chris Mentor. So we will see you there. And as we're talking about access, if you need more information, you can go to ccinfo.unc.edu. You see there on the Access and General Info tab, the first option is Get Access. So you can certainly click that, and it will walk you through the process in much greater detail. In addition to that, if you do need to register for a Connect Carolina class, such as the Creating Journal Entries class that's tied to Access, as I just mentioned, you can just go to Training and register for a class there on the CC Info site, and that will allow you to register. Okay, so at this point, we have been able to cover the enhancements that we wanted to give you some detail on, as well as talk about a few resources available to help you along your way. And at this point, we want to open it up for questions.
Our first question came in from Glenn. Is multiple accounting periods available or only a month at a time?
Glenn, the search criteria only allows for one accounting period at a time. We really had to strike a balance here. There are so many accounting transactions in the table that you're searching from, is that we felt by just providing it by one accounting period, the performance of the search return would be much more efficient. And from talking with many of the campus users, we did feel that that was an adequate balance to strike, that typically you would be correcting based on one period at a time.
Okay, we have another question that came in from T. Can you edit the account number after journal has been submitted?
If the account was editable when you did the entry, you should be able to update or change any of those even after it's been submitted.
Okay, we have a question that came in from Jane. Where do you see the journal header description on the transaction once it hits InfoPort?
Jane, in InfoPort, you will be able to see the new 256-character journal header description if you are searching under the GL Activity tab in InfoPort. You will not see this in the ledger roll-up section because, again, the ledger roll-up really is just at a higher level of data to where you're not necessarily dealing with individual journals. So that information will be available under the GL Activity section of InfoPort.
We have another question from Ross. Will OSR accept our justification of JEs for JEs done after 90 days of the transactions written in the journal header description?
Ross, I think that's really a case-by-case situation. Keep in mind that you still need to include attachments with your correcting JEs. And I think it's hard to answer just on a global basis for that. I think it really depends on the particular OSR project correction. But keep in mind that you do still need to attach some type of justification for the correction.
Adding as much information in the journal header description may help your case and help them determine whether it's an acceptable transaction. But if they're always going to accept that, we cannot say that. It has to be a case-by-case basis.
Okay, we have a question from Tanya. Where do we find this request form to submit to disbursement services to change account on a voucher?
Tanya, I believe that form is on the Procurement Services website, and then it may also be in on the CC Info website. I can follow up with you offline to make sure, but I believe that information is posted on the Finance Division website.
And on our end, we can make sure that's up on CC Info as well, if that has not already been posted there. That'll make that more convenient for everyone to find.
Okay, so Ross would just like to confirm, can we still edit account numbers when submitting a correcting JE, non-voucher, and non-PO?
Yes.
Okay. A question from Lexi. If we get an error, do we get more information on type of error?
The error correction information is just the standard PeopleSoft error information, so it's really not going to be changed from what you were getting in the past.
That's all the questions we have right now. We want to leave it open for a little bit longer in case some more come in. Okay. Here we have a question that came in from Glenn. What attachment would be needed if all you were correcting was program code, for example?
So Glenn, on this one, really all you would need to include is the statement of activity where we can see the transactions that didn't have the program code. All it really is doing is validating that what you put into the journal entry is really truly a transaction that's already hit the system.
Okay, we don't have any other questions at the moment. We'll give it another minute if anybody would like to type something in. AKK had a comment. They couldn't hear the answer about where the account change form is located.
Yeah, I believe that information is on the Finance Division's website in the Procurement Services area, and we will also make sure that form, if it's not already on the CC Info website, will be included.
Okay, I see someone is typing. We'll give it another minute here. We have a question from Marissa. In what cases can we actually change an account code?
So Marissa, in this case, you can change the account code on any regular journal entry and any voucher that, or any non-PO voucher, anything that's not procurement related.
Yeah, and keep in mind, Marissa, that just like in the current version of the JE corrections, you can't correct personnel-related transactions. Those need to be handled through PAT. And the new version of the correcting JE is the same. You cannot handle basically 5-1 type accounts.
They don't even come up in your search results.
AKK, I'm sorry that you're unable to hear. If you can, just contact Steve offline and he'll be happy to answer your question for you.
Okay, so looks like that would be most of the questions there. So again, we certainly want to thank everyone for tuning in to the webinar this morning, and we hope you're as excited as we are about the enhancements, but we really do appreciate you joining us this morning, and we hope everyone has a great rest of the day. Thank you.